Well, welcome. Regina, I know how hard you've been working on this book, and I'm so pleased that it's now time for the rest of the world to read it. So, what's the most important message that you hope readers take away from your book?
Well, thank you, Debbie, and it's good to be here. I really want them to understand how tragedies such as what happened to my family happen, and how relevant they are in society today. I mean, we all hear stories of mass shootings, and it's alarming, but they go right by us. And this story is basically an inside view of all of the systems that failed, leading to this tragedy. I mean, we hear about it and says something must have gone terribly wrong. Well, there's more than one thing that could potentially go wrong. And so this is an inside storytelling view, and it is also a call to action.
So one thing that really interested me is that your book has kind of really a rich background and some magical elements that may remind people of Isabel Allende, that your roots go back hundreds of years in New Mexico. And even in the book, you talk about a vision quest and a drumming journey. And I was intrigued. Tell me why you've chosen to include that in this book.
Well, it was an interesting decision because some of the early readers were wondering if that would somehow compromise my storytelling in the sense of the actual tragedy. But I love Elizabeth Allende. She's an amazing Latina artist or author. She does fictional literature, and one of my favorites, of course, is The House of Spirits, which a movie was made out of, and it was about the Chilean, what happened in Chile. And then Rodolfo Anaya is from my barrio, and he's the pioneer of Chicano literature, and he wrote the book Heart of Aztlán, which is about the Barelas neighborhood. And New Mexico has a unique set of cultural overlays. And those cultural overlays are part of me. They've got the native culture and the Hispanic, which were largely my culture. And then, of course, when the wave of Americans or Anglos came to New Mexico, and there's also an element of the Black culture that came through the South. And it's a part of me, especially from a spiritual perspective. And the drumming journey tells the story of how I had a vision with the animals that helped me decide how I would do the memorials for the family, the descansos. That's a word in Spanish that indicates a memorial, a place where you pin the spirit of the person that has deceased. And my relationship with nature is very, very important to me. And I'm very tied to this land. And so the Vision Quest helped me ground during the chaos of what was going on during this tragedy.
So you were trained and worked as an engineer for many years. Did the skills you used as an engineer kind of help you transition to writing, or was writing kind of an entirely different process? And also, I would imagine that writing this very personal story was cathartic. Talk a little bit about your background and how the writing was. Was it difficult? How you were able to complete the book?
Yeah, well, of course, engineering gives you very good tools, a project management discipline. And I wrote a lot as an engineer, obviously my dissertation. And it's very helpful from that perspective, but storytelling is a different thing. And I've been wanting to write memoir for about 20 years because I believe I have some unique stories to tell. And this one needed to come out first because it is cathartic. It is a way of healing for me. It is a way of pinning this story to the page. It is a descanso for me, a way of giving the story rest. And it is also a call to action. The good thing about this is that it's not purely a literary memoir. It is a story, and I have a lot of data and facts that I back up the story with, and it is a call to action.
So with that, I mean, do you feel that you're now essentially an advocate for either prison reform or gun reform? And are you comfortable taking on that role? It's one thing when you've had a personal tragedy to sort of say, oh, well, now I believe this, but essentially by writing the book and publishing it, you're now out in public talking about, very controversial and sensitive issues.
Well, I put in the story, part of my story was, I was in the DC area when the Newtown event happened, where the mass shooting of the children. Mm-hmm. And I was just beside myself. And there were a couple of other women that I was with and texting. And so I've been a gun sense advocate for a long time, but this put me into a different mode. I am an active member of our New Mexico chapter on Moms Demand Action. I am a Everytown for Gun Sense Survivor Fellow, and I intend to give 40% of all of the book sales profits to Everytown for gun safety. And I'm also, this put me in the middle of the juvenile justice system, how we treat our children when they do something this horrible, or, our children are not necessarily treated well in the juvenile system. And so I've become an active member of the New Mexico Coalition for the Fair Sentencing of Youth. And there's a nonprofit in Washington, D.C. called the Coalition for Fair Sentencing of Youth. And I'm going to give 40% of the profits from the book sales to them. This is incredibly important to me because when this tragedy happened, the first thing that I did a lot of work on was just how we treat our children.
Which is such an important issue. And I think what's really extraordinary about your book is that you are so honest. Many people, I think, would have avoided being as public and writing a book that goes into such detail. I think really for me, what was eye-opening about the book was the kind of behind the scenes look at. We think of a trial as kind of, okay, here's a trial, person is sentenced, and you kind of think, well, that's it, not realizing all the various stages, or what's happening to the accused, and what are the accused rights. So I think in that sense, your book really provides sort of a window into the judicial system, and one that often doesn't treat children any differently than a much older person, and there's kind of no sense. So for me, it was I was sort of surprised. What rights does a younger person have? Is the young person still going to school even though he's in prison? So
exactly, and it was a long journey for us. It was prolonged grief and prolonged it was tough. And I want people to understand how our system failed. And there were a number of ways that failed for my nephew.
Regina, this has been really interesting, and I encourage everybody to read your book, Sins of the System, Trauma, Guns, Tragedy, and the Betrayal of Our Children, and it's available wherever you buy your books. Thank you so much.